All right, we are going to get started here. All right, we do this presentation on every Tuesday and Thursday. For those of you who've been on it before, there'll be some new slides as well as some old slides because sometimes we have some new people on. And I also try to keep what I think are the most important slides in the slide deck and then update it with current information. My name is Dr. Valda Crowder. People affectionately know me as Dr. V. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I've been one now for 30 years. And I've treated patients across 4 pandemics and 2 Category 5 hurricanes. A lot of the information that you're going to see here, the source documents are on AskDrV.us. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is AskDr_V. And all of these presentations are going to be dated. And they're recorded, not including the Q&A, and posted on the website and also on YouTube. So if afterwards you want to show it to somebody, you actually can. All right, the structure is 10 to 15 minutes of a presentation followed by question and answer. The question and answer may or may not take us until 9 o'clock. I sort of take questions up until 9 o'clock and try to answer every question that everyone has. If I don't have the answer, I can look it up and get back to you the following day or Tuesday or Thursday. During this presentation, everyone is in listen mode and we take written questions that are either in the chat or the Q&A box first, or questions that people have actually emailed me in ahead of time. So, the intention of this webinar is to keep participants informed on COVID-19 science that will help you and your family stay healthy and make proper decisions during the pandemic. You will leave the webinar motivated to create an action plan for you and your family, or motivated to create an action plan for your broader community. You may be responsible for a work site, or a church, or a school, or a union, or a homeowners association. So let's just start. I wanted to sort of just go back for just a second because most people think I've never experienced a pandemic when you actually probably have. A pandemic is a worldwide spread of a new disease. It's an infection, it's contagious, and most people do not have immunity to it. Examples are smallpox, polio, tuberculosis, HIV, bird flu, SARS, of which COVID-19 is a SARS-like coronavirus, MERS, malaria, and Zeke. It took us 99 days to reach the first 1 million cases, 43 days to hit the next million, 28 days for us to reach 3 million cases, 4 millionth case came in 2 weeks, 5th million case came in 17 days, and the 6th million case came in 22 days. So we're seeing basically about 1 million cases every 17 to 22, 25 days or so. As often happens with a pandemic, when we think it initially started, it often has started before then. Most people think of COVID-19 as having started sort of in February or March. I know for myself, I started ordering extra materials in January. But new studies looking at hospitalization rates and clinic visits actually shows that COVID-19 may have hit as early as December. And this is why it's so important for us to have public health surveillance systems that actually work, because the sooner you recognize this, the actual better, so you can actually do more to stop it and contain it. Cases have been on the rise in the Midwest. Dr. Fauci has recommended these states actually go on lockdown: South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, and Illinois. The shutdown that we did have, where all of us stayed at home nationwide for several weeks, studies are now looking at the fact that we may have prevented 60 million cases of coronavirus infection. That's amazing. And that's 300,000 or 400,000 people that would have been dead that are not dead. So whenever you think about, you know, geez, I don't like this right now, I don't either, but think about all of the lives and all the people and all the family members and friends that we have in our lives that have not been sick as a result of the sacrifice that we've made. Now, how do I know if myself or my family have COVID? Diagnosis is made by PCR test, antigen test, or CAT scan findings. The PCR test is a nasal swab. Antigen test is what we call the rapid test. And the CAT scan test is what we use. It's a CT of your chest, and we use that when the other tests are negative and we really think that someone still has coronavirus. And this kind of actually goes through the different tests. The main thing to note is that the PCR test can be negative if it's done too soon or too late. The rapid test or antigen test is negative 20 to 30% of the time when the person really does have COVID-19. So as a result, if we do a rapid test, we will often do 2 of them before we determine that someone's negative. This is actually photos of a CAT scan. The yellow diagram, the yellow arrows in the middle on the bottom row kind of show you what the ground glass or linear opacifications, and basically they're little white lines that are in the lung field that should not be there. All right, everyone who's been on this presentation knows it's really important to respect COVID-19. It's highly contagious. Minimum time of exposure to infect others is only 45 seconds, so it can be very quick. Not enough time to put on a mask if you don't have on a mask. So that's why it's important to always have on a mask before you run into someone. In addition, if you look at 100 people who get exposure to COVID-19, 60 to 80% of them will become COVID-19 positive. This is in comparison with the flu, where the number is almost half of that, 30 to 40%. So this is definitely not like the flu. COVID-19, we thought it could be a droplet disease. We now realize that it can separate into micro droplets and also be an airborne disease. So it can travel as both. That's why the initial recommendation was to stay 3 feet away, which is the space parameter for a droplet disease. And we now say 6 feet or more because we realize that it actually is infectious in both ways. I tell people it is important not to use a nebulizer if you live at home with others and you have asthma. You cannot tell the difference between an asthma attack and a COVID-19 attack. And if it's COVID-19 and you use a nebulizer inside your home, you've made it airborne and spread it throughout the home. So other recommendations are to use a nebulizer in a garage with the door open or on a deck outdoors, or to use an inhaler with a spacer or aero chamber. Now, there's six different clusters of COVID-19 symptoms. Cluster 1 and 2 are flu-like symptoms with or without a fever. You don't always have to have a fever with COVID-19. There's also a cluster that is primarily GI symptoms. So you may think you even just had food poisoning. It can be more nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Those 1, 2, and 3 are more likely to be treated as an outpatient. Clusters 4, 5, and 6 are associated with a lot of fatigue, confusion, a combination of respiratory and abdominal symptoms. These are people who usually wind up being admitted to the hospital or go to the ICU or may actually die from COVID-19. All right, what to do if you found out you're COVID-19 positive? 1, quarantine immediately, preferably for 21 days. We found that after 14 days, there are some people that were still positive. So it's very important to quarantine for 21 days. In your quarantine room, these are some must-haves. So 1, a pulse ox. Now, a lot of people have asked me, what is a pulse ox? That measures the level of oxygen in your blood system by a percentage. If you're 95% or above and you're a non-smoker, that's normal. If you're less than 95, that means that you're having difficulty breathing. The reason why you want to measure with a pulse ox is one of the things about COVID-19 is people are short of breath and they don't know they're short of breath. This is leading to people getting very, very sick, sometimes not even being able to call 911, sometimes passing out. So it's very important that you get a pulse ox and check your pulse ox a couple of times a day. We also recommend that people start zinc, vitamin D3. You have a bathroom that is only used by yourself, a cell phone where you can call for help. People leave food at your door, and you open up the windows or get a HEPA filter for your heating and air conditioning system if you share a home with other people. All right, EPA just on Monday actually approved 3 ZEP disinfectants that kill COVID-19 in 60 seconds. All of these can be purchased at Lowe's or Home Depot, and we've listed them out for you, and we've also added them to our website. So I know, some people were really have been having problems finding disinfectants and cleaners. This is a new one that was recently approved. All right, so we're going to talk about masks real quickly. So the N95 mask, the inventor was Peter Zeke, and basically what he did was he discovered the electrostatically charged fabric and that attracts particles like a magnet, and it really improves the efficiency of a general mask. So the fact that this fabric on the outside of your mask actually attracts particles is actually why you should not touch the outside of your mask, and instead you should touch it just by the straps that go around your ears. His recommendation is 7 masks, 1 for each day of the week. That's about a $40 investment. And then hang them up, and then don't return to the Monday mask until a week later, and that allows time for any virus to deactivate. It is important that you actually use a mask without a valve, which is the one on the right. The valve type is not recommended by the Center for Disease Control and allows for you to breathe out, possibly infecting other people. So you want to use the mask with no valve on the right-hand side. This is an FDA registered, not yet approved mask. It's an N99 mask with active ventilation and a HEPA filter, and it's clear. So people can also see your smile. Neckgators. We see a lot of people wear the Neckgators that are exercising or riding their bike, and they pull them up and pull them down. These actually have been found to increase the transmission of COVID-19, so they are not recommended. Now, this came out in the news recently where the CDC head, Dr. Redfield, said that masks may be better than coronavirus and implores people to wear them. And this is actually true. So I had another a slide, which I've since taken out, which showed that if 2 people wear a mask, the likelihood of COVID-19 transmission is 98.5, right? So that is the effectiveness, essentially, of 2 people wearing a mask. As an example, the Moderna vaccine, which there's 2 shots followed by 28 days, is 70% effective. So masks are, so far from what we're seeing, masks are very, very effective. Now, all the vaccines that are going through all the trials, there may be some that are more effective than what we're actually seeing from the Moderna vaccine, but at least some of the, what we're seeing is the masks are extremely effective when worn by everyone. All right, a lot of people talk about deaths by COVID-19. I want to talk a little bit more about long-term side effects, because that's also a significant part of this. About 75% of COVID-19 patients that recover from the ICU and go home suffer from what we call post-intensive care syndrome. So this is cognitive, mental, or physical impairment that is relatively permanent or long-term. So renal failure requiring dialysis or transplant, limb amputations. For the young people, we're seeing a lot of strokes and clotting. Also, a lot of pulmonary fibrosis, decreased lung capacity. You hear people say, you know, I caught COVID-19 and I haven't gotten over it. I'm still fatigued. I'm still short of breath. About a third are reporting difficulty with normal activity, like walking a block or house cleaning. Let's see here. We looked at Big Ten athletes. And about a third of the COVID-19 positive patients actually develop myocarditis. Myocarditis is an inflammation of the muscle of your heart. So it's the pumping mechanism of your heart. And myocarditis is an inflammation of that, which then decreases the efficiency at which your heart pumps. This is a patient, not a patient, but a football player recently who returned back to high school. I mean, I'm sorry, not high school, but college, and 20 years old, played football and actually recently passed from COVID-19. We found that of the COVID-19 deaths that are less than 21 years old, 75% of them are Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous. So let's talk about herd immunity, because there's been some talk about herd immunity. I had these slides in and I kind of put them back in because there's more talk now about herd immunity. So herd immunity is a reduction in the risk of infection because a significant portion of the population has become immune. So you can become immune two ways. One, by natural infection. That normally requires 70 to 90% of the population to get infected, and also to have long-term immunity, right? So you have to get infected and have long-term immunity. Or the other thing is it can be by vaccine. So this is something that we're hearing about in the news as a strategy. So I want to really talk about that. All right. So if we assume that 80% of the population needs to be infected, the United States population is 330 million. 80% would be 264 million people catching COVID-19. So far, 6 million cases of COVID-19 have caused about 103,000 deaths. 264 million COVID-19 cases would cause about 8 million deaths. So a herd immunity strategy would cause catastrophic death. We would see about 1 out of every 30 to 40 people actually dying and no longer being here with us. So this is really not a strategy really to even speak of, because the implementation of such would be horrific on many levels. Sweden actually attempted it. And they failed, and they actually stopped and went to mask and social distancing. The other thing that makes herd immunity almost impossible is, like I said, 80% of the people have to get it, and you also have to have long-term immunity as a result of getting it. Well, we have now found patients that have been reinfected with COVID-19. So what we found is that after about 3 to 6 months, the antibodies begin to wear off, and you actually can get this again. This is very, very important for people who have actually gotten COVID-19 and recovered. They need to wear a mask and social distance just like everyone else. All right, so let's switch phases for just a second and let's talk about vaccines. This is a general format of how a vaccine goes sort of as birthed or born. There's an exploratory phase where you're actually looking at how the infection works, as well as a preclinical phase, which is actually tested in animals. Because of SARS, that work was already done on COVID-19. COVID-19 is a very similar virus to SARS. And because of that, the exploratory and preclinical phase was already complete. Clinical development is then phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is a small group of people to assess safety and sometimes to look at immune response. Phase 2 is an increased number of people where you actually begin to do a randomized trial. Some people get the vaccine, some people don't. And then phase 3 is the final phase where now they're actually they're doing like 30,000 people in phase 3, and they're looking at both how well does it work as well as the safety of the various vaccines. Then usually there's a regulatory review and approval process, manufacturing, quality control, and distribution. And let me just say, we have actually never really done a nationwide adult vaccination program. So that is different for us. If you look at the coronavirus vaccine tracker, right now there's probably about 50 or 60 vaccines that are in enough of a format where they actually present a possibility. So we may have more than one vaccine that come out as viable. It's very important that all phases of the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of the clinical trials are completed. This is on our website. There are 22 case studies where the phase 2 results were very, very different from the phase 3 results. So it's very important that phase 1, 2, and 3 are completed in its entirety. And the CEOs of the pharmaceutical companies actually agreed, they all agreed that they're going to wait until phase 3 data is complete before filing for approval. They also all prepared and signed a pledge, a joint pledge of safety and standards, coming to an agreement on what are the things that we're going to do to make sure that we have a vaccine, but that it's also safe. German company BioNTech actually believes that they will have a vaccine ready for approval sometime in December. AstraZeneca, on the other hand, is working with Oxford University, and they had to pause their vaccine study because they had an unexplained illness. They had someone who had what they call transverse myelitis, which is basically an inflammation of the spinal cord. The person did live and actually did leave the hospital, but that's a pretty significant side effect, and they're not sure if it was a side effect or if it was related to COVID, and they're still investigating it. But in the meantime, they did pause the vaccine study in the UK. I'm not sure about the United States, but I know in the UK they paused it. So the other issue is that enough people have to actually take the vaccine for it to actually be effective and to work. So to really get herd immunity by vaccination, then you really need to have 70, 80% of the people actually take the vaccine. All right, so other places that are looking at vaccines are kovacs. Kovacs has an ACT accelerator that is a groundbreaking collaboration. It's a global collaboration that accelerates the development, production, and equitable access to COVID-19 tests, treatment, and vaccines. So COVAX is led by 3 organizations, Sepi, Gabi, and the World Health Organization. And I'll go over all of those a little bit in a couple future slides. But let me first just talk about what COVAX offers. They provide doses for at least 20% of the country's population. They actively manage a diverse portfolio of vaccines. They deliver the vaccines as soon as they're readily available, with a goal to end the acute phase of a pandemic. And they also help to rebuild economies, because as you can see, a pandemic can be devastating to an economy. So when you look at with Gabi, Gabi is a global alliance for vaccines and immunizations. This includes the World Health Organization, UNICEF, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Bank, research agencies, vaccine manufacturers, donor countries, research agencies, all sort of working together. As part of their mission is to reduce poverty and protect the world against the threat of epidemics. Gabi has a history already. They've vaccinated more than 760 million children in the world's poorest countries, and they've prevented more than 13 million deaths. Sepi is a coalition for epidemic preparedness and innovation. And this is a partnership between public, private, and philanthropic and civil organizations launched to develop vaccines to stop future epidemics. Sepi's basic role is to sort of discover, develop, licensure, manufacture, deliver, stockpile, etc. And they work with any number of organizations from NIH to Wellcome Trust, to World Health Organizations, to UNICEF, to Gavi, etc. And then the World Health Organization currently has 169 COVID-19 vaccine candidates under development, with 26 of these in human trial phases. And so they also are working in conjunction with scientists, businesses, global health organizations, using the ACT Accelerator to speed up the pandemic response. All right, now let's talk a little bit about what's happening where you are, all right? It's very important that you actually know your zone. What type of area are you in? Are you in a red zone where the infection is very, very high? You have more than 100 new cases per 100,000 and a diagnostic test positivity rate greater than 10%, which basically means if you gave out 100 tests, more than 10 of them come back positive. Or yellow zone, which is between 10 and 100 per 100,000, where you'd have 5 to 10 out of 100 tests come back positive. Or a green zone, which is less than 10 per 100,000, with a diagnostic test positivity rate less than 5%. Now, most people don't know. So when you're looking at things like kids going back to school, whether or not I should go back to church, you really do want to see where you are. So the website to do that is covidactnow.org, covidactnow.org. You can go onto that website, I'll show it to you. You can click your state, you can click your county, and you want to see where you are. When you're talking about going back to school, it's important to know, what are the age of my children? Who else lives at home? Do I live in a multi-generational home? So it's always better to be on the safe side. And it's really, really important that you factor all of these things in. This is what the COVID Act Now website looks like. Now, just because the whole state may be orange, when you actually click that state, or red or yellow, when you click the state, then it will pull up the different counties, and the different counties will actually be in different categories. They also have a category of orange. So orange to me is the same as red. So they sort of segment out highly infected and super duper infected. To me, I think you should really take, if you're orange, consider yourself to be red and act accordingly. Now, what have other countries done to reopen schools and their economy? The main thing is they've decreased their community infection rate. That is the #1 thing that is important. With mask mandates, social distancing, limiting unnecessary outings. For schools, they've decreased class size, they moved desks 6 feet apart, removed public water fountains, provided PPE for teachers and administrators, more frequently cleaned rooms, offices, and buses, and installed cleaning stations and done temperature testing. Now, this is a COVID risk chart that was put together by the Texas American Medical Association. And let me just say this, I want to actually make sure that, because this has things that you actually, things that you can that you're actually doing that may be high or low risk. But in the group of 9, they have, as far as high risk, they have attending a religious service with 500 plus worshipers or more. I want to make sure 500, it doesn't need to be 500. I wouldn't even attend a religious service with 50 people, right? And I want to really be clear, because there's been a lot of confusion. It's really, really important that you don't go to funerals or weddings or really any sort of celebration that's going to be indoors, right? Particularly if there's singing or music. You'll see large music concert is up here at a 9. Those things have been found, or even a gym class indoors. Musical instruments, singing, huffing and puffing from like a Zumba class have been found to aerosolize, which makes the particles move around more and smaller and easier to breathe in. So it's very important to stay away from those things. As you go further down, swimming in a public pool, less dangerous. Going to the beach, less dangerous. If we keep on going, eating outside at a restaurant, less dangerous. Going for a walk or a run or a bike ride, less dangerous. Playing golf, less dangerous. Playing tennis, going camping. These are the things that you actually really want to do if you feel like you really have to get out now. And then they have as a 1, opening mail in your own home. All right, So this is just, I know people don't necessarily want to hear this, but I think it's important that we don't expect life to go back to normal next year. We are going to spend the majority of 2021 really trying to get our population vaccinated, assuming that we have a safe, effective vaccine. And it is going to take most of 2021 to actually effectively do that for 300 million people. And so I think that it's really important that we actually sort of create some routines now that we feel like we can actually take on for the next 6 to 8 months. All righty, I am going to now go to Q&A.